The Buckinghams evolved from a couple of other bands. So what was happening back then?
Well, there was like I said, there was a lot of little bands running around, and the way John Polis, I started out singing in an a cappella group in high school, and we used to do all those great things, She Cried, and all those great little doo-wop songs, and there was another guy that was singing with me. It was a guy named George LeGros, and we used to come back from high school together and go up into his house and listen to Everly Brothers albums and Righteous Brothers albums and learn how to sing together. So that was our education. The a cappella group was, how to listen and where you belonged in the chord. And then the Everly Brothers were great harmonies. The harmonies on Everly Brothers records are different than any other kind of harmony. They had that sibling connection, so they did harmonies that weren't normal, and it was a great education. So George and I used to be known as the two guys that sang a lot, and we used to go to dances and stuff. And John Polis was a drummer, and he was in a band that didn't sing or anything, because most bands didn't then. So he approached us and said, "Look, I have a band that can hardly play. They don't sing at all. Would you guys be the singers in the band?" Well, we jumped right on that opportunity right away, and we started singing with this band. And then, of course, the band evolved into new players and different people, and we became the Pulsations. And we started playing around dances in different places, drag strips and all kinds of places, car shows, wherever they would have us, and we would play and sing. And George and I did a lot of, duet stuff and everything. We stepped out as solo guys every once in a while. And we started looking as the band started getting better and started evolving. Some players would leave. One of our guitar players spent more time in the lockup than he did on the stage, so we had to get rid of him. People were learning how to be people, so they went different directions. And so we were then playing a lot with, there'd always be a couple of bands, and there was a band called the Centuries. And Carl was in that band, and he played guitar, and Nick played rhythm guitar, and Carl's cousin Jerry Alardi was the drummer. And so and Carl was an interesting guitar player, a little different than other people. And John and I used to go, this guy's pretty good. He's a little different, and he's good looking, and he might fit in the band. This could be good for us. So we talked, and of course it was a family band, so they had a little bit of a weight to go, and then they started to drift apart, because as bands do, people want to do different things. And Carl came over into our band, and we already had a bass player that came with Kurt Bachman, and Nick went off and played with some other bands for a while, and then so the Centuries kind of dissolved a little bit, and then Carl became a Pulsation, and then we kept going, and the Pulsations then got a TV show called on WGN TV in Chicago called All Time Hits. It was a battle of the bands, and we wanted the battle of the bands to be this rock portion of this show that played all these different kinds of music, which was Broadway music, standards, and popular music, and we would do the song of the week on the show. So it was a pretty cool thing. They dressed us in gold tuxedos, and we looked pretty sharp for young little whippersnappers. So we were doing pretty good, and it was live. We had to perform live on the show, which was good. And and then right in about the middle of that show, George LeGros got drafted, and he went off into the Army and left me as the default lead singer. And soon after that, before the show was over, Kurt Bachman, our bass player, left, and we got Nick Fortuna to come in and be the bass player. And so now we had Carl and Nick in the band. We had another keyboard player, a guy named Dennis, and but he left the band. He played on Kind of a Drag. He was the organ player on Kind of a Drag, but he left the band to become a chiropractor. And so we then were without a keyboard. We had a couple of keyboard. One of our better keyboard players after that was a guy named Larry Nestor, who still works in Chicago as an arranger and a conductor, and he's a great keyboard player. And he was a great influence on us to keep us steady into our roots. And then the band, we just kind of evolved out of that. Became on the TV show. They asked us before they actually started taping the first show. They said, "Look, because of the British invasion, would you mind changing your name to something sounding more British for the show?" And we said, "Well, we don't really want to, pretend that we're British, but, we'll see what we can do. And the next day at rehearsal, this security guard who had, for the time in 1965, had curiously long blonde hair under his little uniform cap, kind of walked up to us and said, "I heard what they asked you. Here's a list of names I thought of last night." And on that list was this name, the Buckinghams. And when that jumped off the list, we said, well, this is great because it sounds English, but there's Buckingham Fountain in Chicago with Grand Park.
I'm very aware of that, being a Chicagoan.
Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful fountain. And we said, well, this is great. This works because we have 1 foot in Chicago, 1 foot in the British-sounding name, and so that would be a good thing to do. So we did. And matter of fact, the Kind of a Drag album cover is a picture of us standing in front of Buckingham Fountain.
Yeah, that's right.
So we tried, we sealed the deal on that to make sure that everybody knew that it was about the Buckingham Fountain and that it sounded English and we were, going forward. So that worked out really well, and that's pretty much how the Buckinghams evolved from the Pulsations and a couple of parts of the Centuries, and that pretty much then locked us in. But then we lost the other keyboard player. And, of course, like I said, we had recorded Kind of a Drag already, and they dropped us from the label. So we had no label. We had a song out there, and we had no keyboard player either. And we used to go downtown to a place called the Pussycat Lounge in Rush Street, which was a great little club just below the Happy Medium, which was one of the better jazz clubs in Chicago. And we used to go see this band called The Exceptions, which was probably the top playing professional guys in Chicago who weren't making it except playing in clubs. And in that band was Peter Cetera, playing bass, who later joined Chicago, and Marty Greb, who then became our keyboard player. And so Marty then joined our band, and that's when the Buckinghams really started. Marty was a big influence because he was a major musician, and he played guitar and B3 and saxophone like a wizard. And so he was a big influence on us, and he kind of gave us a strong backbone to move forward and to experiment and to actually be as good as we could be. And so that then became the Buckinghams that everybody knows today. And that was the evolution of us getting into that position to be the Buckinghams. And then Marty actually had a lot of influence on us writing our own material then. And we started writing on all of our albums after that. So that was the evolution from the Nobodies, actually not the Nobodies, but the Darcells, which was the a cappella group. We were called the Darcells, and into the Pulsations, into the Buckinghams.
And you mentioned George LeGros. He lived in Madison for quite a while.
Yes, he did.
Yep,
yes, he did. He was an agent, and he played bass in a blues band up there, yes.
Yeah, and he's no longer with us. And
no, he passed away some years ago, yeah, and we were great friends, and we actually had a great reunion about 9 years ago in Chicago, and he came down from Madison, and we hung out for a couple of days, and we had great times. What was great about George is that he came in because we had recorded one song, I think, when he was still in the band. It was our first little thing, but we recorded "Sweets for My Sweet," and that was the only song that George was ever on that we recorded. And but when he got the bump into to be drafted, and he came in on leave at one point when we were playing a car show at the McCormick Place, and he came in and was as nice as he could be, and we were all being like, oh my God, George, we're so sorry that this happened and stuff, and when you come out, let's get back together and do this. And he actually stood back and said, no, he says, I just listened to you guys play. He says, what I heard is really good. He says, and I wouldn't want to mess with that at all. And he says, I'm going to move on when I get out. He says, I still got a couple of years to go anyway. He says, and I've got some ideas I'm going to work on anyway, but what I hear now, as far as you guys being the Buckinghams, this is how it should be. So we got his blessing, which was an amazing thing for anybody to do who got cut short of having a career there. But he went on to do some good work. So, he made a good choice, and he was a strong guy.